So, I mean, one of the things I've been telling the people who've been watching my videos and in the live conversations is that you have to take yourself seriously. You have to know that you're a monster and that you're capable of terrible things, and that you have a responsibility to understand that, to incorporate it, to constrain it, and to discipline it, and then to work for the alleviation of suffering and the constraint of malevolence. And if you understand that, then it can turn your life into a noble enterprise. And then you have some self-respect, which beats the hell out of self-esteem in my estimation. So, and I don't think that that's a difficult message for people to understand. I think they know that at a fundamental level, and I think at the moment they're starving to death for it.
The subordinate principle. So the thing, when you talk about this elevated state, this elevated thing, I think I've figured out that what you're talking about is essentially truth. Is that to you sort of what we need to do is deal in truth on a daily basis in our own lives and in the lives with people around us?
Well, I think it's two things. Like in sort of classical Christian morality, and I bring it up because it's sort of at the substructure of Western ethics. There's two things. There's truth and love, and you know, both of those words are even hard to say because they've been mouthed to death. But they have, in some sense, they have a deep technical meaning, and if you know that, then it kind of reignites their power. And love is the decision that being is worthwhile and that you should struggle to support and improve it. And that's not a trivial thing, because being is rife with suffering. You know, everyone dies, everyone gets sick. Like it's brutal, and it's easy to turn against it. And so the idea that you're going to voluntarily accept responsibility for that, assume that it's good or act as if it's good and try to improve it is no trivial matter. And that means you have to scour out the resentment and the arrogance and the deceit primarily. And it's sort of based on this idea, I would say, is like, well, life is very hard, obviously, but we're not doing everything we could to make it better. And we're often doing things to make it worse. So even if it is suffering, which is true, we have no idea how much we could ameliorate that if we all put our efforts into it. And so that's a genuine question. It's like, yeah, there's reasons to shake your fist and curse God. I mean, everyone ends up in a situation like that. Someone they love gets a terrible illness and disintegrates before their eyes, you know, and maybe they're a really good person and they've done nothing you would think of to deserve that. And, you know, that terrible fate is visited upon them. It's very difficult not to get cynical and angry under such circumstances. But then, well, that takes you down a very bad road if you do that. But it doesn't change the fundamental question. It's like, if your life isn't everything you think it should be, you have to ask yourself if you're doing everything you can. Because you actually don't get to make a judgment about the structure of being until you do everything you can. And I would say that's love, essentially. That's the decision. And then truth is the best strategy with regards to that attainment. And how could it be otherwise? Like, if you're going to contend with reality, you bloody well better know what it is. You know, and truth isn't your grandmother's, you know, your too tight-laced grandmother's moral finger wagging. It's like the truth of existence is brutal and bitter. And so to be able to face that and to admit to the things that you are and to communicate them with other people, especially in an intimate relationship, it's like that's no cowardly morality. That's not the morality of cowardice, quite the contrary. You know, Nietzsche said you could assess the spirit of a man by determining how much truth he could tolerate. It's like that's the right way of thinking about truth. Well, you opened this whole podcast with some truth. It's like, who wants to hear that? You know, and people think, oh, that's so terrible, and they don't think, well, could I be one of those ISIS guys? It's like, I can tell you, if you're bitter enough, especially if you hate women, you know, because they've rejected you because you're so goddamn useless that no woman in their right mind would look at you twice. You know, that'll generate plenty of bitterness in your soul. And if you don't think that you could act like that under those conditions, then you're not even watching your own fantasies. So, truth in the service of the betterment of being, it's something like that. And that's enough to give your life meaning. I don't care where you start. Like, I had this kid come and visit me a while back, and he had never left his home state. And I think he was 19, and he was overprotected and oversheltered, and he was a smart kid, and so of course he also thought that the world really hadn't appreciated his gifts, which is a very common feeling for smart kids who aren't getting anywhere, right? They get really angry about that. And then he decided that he was going to move out of his house, and he took a job as a dishwasher. And he said he tried to do a good job as a dishwasher. It's like, good, that's some humility. It's just a dishwashing job. But you can be a good dishwasher. And then the restaurant runs better. And then it's kind of fun. As long as the people you're working with are half decent, you can make good social relationships, and then you can learn to be social, which was happening to him. And then maybe they let you be a short order cook, and you got a bit of a clue, and then you have a bit of money and you have a little independence, and it's a lot better than being at home and being bitter and resentful and immature. It's just a dishwashing job. Well, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's like it's the first door that's open to you. And then he came up to Toronto. He'd never been out of his home state, so it was a big deal for him to come to another city. And when he first came to talk to me, it was outside of one of my lectures. He couldn't even speak. He was so nervous because he had pretty high levels of social anxiety. So he was tongue-tied. And I invited him to come over to my house to talk to him because I knew there was something up with him. And he told me this story, and I thought, well, that's the beginnings of a heroic journey. He was able to humble himself enough so that, if you're low, if you're in a low place, it's a low door that's going to open. And you might think, I'm too high to crawl through that low door. Carl Jung said, modern people don't see God because they don't look low enough. I really like that idea. But that's it. If you're in a low place, the opportunity that presents itself to you is going to be low. And it's going to be very tempting to you because you're arrogant and resentful to say, well, that's not good enough for me. It's like, well, do you have an alternative? If you don't have an alternative, then an inch up is up, and it's the right trajectory, and so that's humility. It's like you're low. You take what's given to you, and you see if you can make it work. And the thing is, that works way faster than people think. Even because I worked as a dishwasher when I was a kid, for a year or so. And it was really hard to begin with because I didn't know what I was doing. And the German chef, who was kind of a tough guy, just let me flounder around for 2 weeks to see if I would quit. So I was there till like 3 a.m. And I was 13, I think. I couldn't wash all these damn dishes. I thought it was impossible. I told my dad at one point, I said, I don't know if I can do this. It's like I'm working as hard as I can and they keep piling up, but I didn't stop. And then the German cook, who had been treating me pretty harshly, at one day he said, okay, I'll show you how to do this. And then he showed me how to organize the dishes and everything. And it was like, that was no problem. I could do it in like 10% of the time. So then I cleaned up the rest of the kitchen. I had a good time mucking about with the chefs, and we played around a lot back there. And I ended up working as a short order cook, and I learned to cook and all of that. And that was a good part of my adolescence. But the thing is that those trivial jobs, it's the conception of their triviality that makes them trivial. They're not trivial, not if you do them right. And if you're around people who've any sense, sensible people are always looking around for other people who can do things right. And if they see you trying to do things right, the probability that they'll open a door for you is virtually 100%, because it's kind of rare, So they're going to be skeptical to begin with, to see you got to prove your mettle, let's say. But as soon as you do, they'll think, okay, well, we'll give this kid a little bit more opportunity and see what happens. And, to not think that's how the world works is to be extraordinarily cynical, because that is how it works in a functioning society. Yeah,
I work with businesses all the time, and there is anybody that is just above normal competency in anything, anybody that's going to try, anybody that's going to put effort in, they love those people. And those people are going to do well, and you're absolutely right that doors are absolutely going to open for them if they do what they're trying to do to the best of their ability and doing a competent job at it.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is what happens to people who aren't trying, because what happens to them is like they're in a place where there's 1,000 doors in front of them that are invisible. They don't know the doors are there. And they could either be opened or closed. And so if they're one of these people who is going above and beyond the call of duty, unless the organization is entirely corrupt, right? And that happens sometimes. Then there are people who are watching, and they'll start to open these invisible doors. And then all of a sudden the person has opportunities in front of them. And they don't even know why some of the time, right? Because someone said, gave a positive word to someone else and said, well, you could take a look at this kid. And so these doors open. And then the people who are in there grudgingly and bitterly, it's like people watch that, and they're the people who are the gatekeepers, and they just close the doors. And then the person looks up, and there's nothing in front of them. There's no open doors at all, and then they curse God, for making such a miserable cosmos. It's like, no, you just don't understand what happened. It's like the fruits of your bitterness your bitterness manifested fruit. You don't even know it. You've delimited your options in a terrible way, and you've closed, you're walking between cliff walls, and they're getting closer and closer and closer together, and then you'll be stuck, and you'll think, how the hell did this happen? And it happened because you didn't avail yourself of the opportunities that presented themselves to you. So, that's horrible, but that's how it is.
I get asked quite often, this guy got promoted and I should have gotten promoted. What should I do now? Or this person isn't carrying their load and they think I should do their work. What should I do now? And, the answer is, yeah. Someone wants you to do their work. Do their work.
Yes,
do their work.
Yes,
I'll do that all day long.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, you don't want to do your job. That's fine. I'll do it. Yeah. And actually, I just answered a question where somebody said, "The guy's a friend of mine, and he's not carrying his load. What should I do?" And I said, "Well, how about you help him? What's going on at home? Is he going through a divorce? Has he got issues? Is his kid sick? How about you help him and say, hey, let me take that off your plate right now." Because in 2 months or 6 months, you might be the person that needs help. You might be the person with a sick child. But regardless of that, maybe he's just as lazy, and maybe he shouldn't be your friend, and maybe eventually he won't be your friend. But nonetheless, the solution is the same. If you don't want to do your work, that's fine. I'll do it for you.
Yeah, well, that's such a funny thing. That's exactly right. Because, what you want to do in your job is make yourself indispensable, right? And the way you make yourself indispensable is by being indispensable. And the way you do that is by doing a bunch of things that if they're not done, catastrophe occurs. And that's exactly right. So if there's someone around you and they're abdicating their responsibility and you can pick it up, it's like, what an opportunity. You think, well, I'm not going to get credit for it. It's like, well, first of all, there's lots of different forms of credit, but you learn. And then when the company shrinks and they're looking at who to keep, they think, oh, well, it turns out you're doing all sorts of things. We can't do without you. That's not what we expected. We can't do without you. Here's some more things you could do. And then you're also in a position to bargain. You can say, well, look, in order for me to keep doing this level of responsibility, I need to be paid more because I have other options, or because it's just, or because that will make me more efficient. But then you've got some power too, because they need you. And so indispensability, and that's power. Indispensability is power, not tyranny. So